Watch, I'm gonna film this video and then I'm gonna get a B next semester. I study biochemistry at Georgia Tech, and somehow I am about to go into my junior year and still have a 4.0 average. What is my secret? A lot of my friends have asked me in the past, how do I do so well in school? How do I keep good grades? I have always had really good grades since like the beginning of high school, and I've always had like notoriously really good study habits. And I've had a lot of my friends be like, what is your secret? Well, I am about to tell you. I want to start off this video by saying I think it is such a awful view to have that I guess like your self-worth and your worth as a student equates to like a grade on an exam. I just want to put this disclaimer out there because that is such an unhealthy mindset to have, and I know I've struggled with this in the past. Doing well on exams can be very beneficial for you, for your confidence, and for your future, but in no way should you, I guess, define your worth as a student based on how well you do on exams. Love yourself regardless of the grades you get. But with that being said, I have picked out 8 different things that I do that I believe have attributed to my success as a student and that I wish to share with you guys today. So number 1 is I believe I have a very academic mindset. What I mean by that is ever since I've started like college, even in high school, I kind of have this mindset that like my job right now for the next 4 or 5 years is to be a student. Of course, like any other job, I make sure I take breaks, I make sure I have time with friends, but I also keep myself accountable, and I'm like, this is my job right now, this is my occupation, so I need to put effort into it. I cannot be slacking. This kind of mindset to like look at studying as like an occupation has very much helped me not only stay responsible, but also balance it with my regular life. The second thing I want to talk about is that it's taken a lot of trial and error, but I have figured out my studying style and what works for me. This is something that's just going to take time, and it's going to take getting to know yourself and thinking about what works for you. If you have a specific way of studying and you're realizing that it's not giving you the results you want, you can start trying different things. For example, I realized that I study much better in quiet places, but I used to not always study in quiet places and I would get distracted really easily. So then once I started studying in quiet places, I was like, oh wait, this is so much better. Even for subjects, you may have different things that work for different subjects. Like for example, like for math, maybe doing a lot of practice problems may be the most beneficial, but maybe for something like biology, reading the textbook might be more beneficial. So it's also important to know what kind of topics and study habits correlate and work best for you. Tip number 3 I have is to have a study ritual. So for me personally, whenever I'm getting ready to study, especially for those long days where I know I'm going to be at the library for like really long studying, what I like to do is I like to go to the cafe and get myself a little coffee, and then I go up to Georgia Tech has a library like quiet area called Crossland Tower, and I always go to the 7th floor. Once I'm there, I'm kind of like, all right, I am ready, I am in the mindset to study. Having kind of like a study ritual to get you in that mindset can be very beneficial in kind of getting your brain to be like, all right, let's close out all the distractions. Right now is my time to focus and study. I like to go to the library a lot because once I'm there, I have the mindset that like right now it's time to work. That's a change in scenery that I heavily associate with study. And that also allows my dorm room to kind of like not be associated with stress. And so once I go back home to my dorm, I feel a lot more relaxed and I'm like, okay, like I am done for the day now. Another tip I have is to plan your studying accordingly. I really think that it's very beneficial to have an agenda and use that to plan your studying. My personal thing that I do is I have my agenda, and on my like monthly calendar, I go down and I mark when all my exams are gonna be. Maybe like a week or 2 before the exam, I take a little sticky note and I make a list of everything I want to do to prepare for that exam, whether that's reading notes, practice exams, going over homework, rewatching pre-lecture videos, whatever it may be. I make a list of everything I want to do, and I kind of space that out on a daily basis so that throughout the week, I'm studying for an hour or 2 a day, and then once the exam comes, I've done all this stuff to study, I'm very prepared, and I was never overwhelmed at any point. I also think that having a planner allows you to get a lot more work done in a manageable and not draining manner. And it allows you to also have the satisfaction of like checking things off a to-do list so that by the time you're done, you're like, wow, I've done so much, like I've been productive today, and it allows you to feel a lot more accomplished, which can help a lot with the mindset of like studying and feeling like you've been doing a good job studying. I also want to emphasize that when you set daily goals for yourself, make sure they are realistic daily goals. Don't be expecting yourself to go through 20 chapters in one day. That will leave you burnt out and drained and like you haven't done anything, because towards the end of that, you're gonna just not be retaining information. Tip number 5 is to start studying from day one. What I mean by this is not to start grinding out like homeworks from day one, but to start being conscious of the exam you're going to take from day one. So that means kind of being in the studying mindset from day one. When I take notes, when I expose myself to the material, I still consider that studying because it's not like homework or a project. It's something I'm doing to learn and expose myself to the material. And I start doing that way before the exam. There are several reasons I do this. One is because it allows me to really be familiar with the material, so that way I know what my weaknesses are well in advance before the exam, and I have plenty of time to brush up on those weaknesses, to ask questions, to clarify content. And the second reason is because I have realized that allowing content to simmer in your brain reinforces a lot better. So like when I'm first introduced to a new concept, I'm like, I have no idea what this is. But then like 3-4 days after knowing that concept and reviewing it, it starts to kind of like settle in, and my brain's like, okay, wait, this is starting to kind of make sense. And so if you're allowing yourself plenty of time before an exam to kind of be conscious of the material, it can make a huge difference in your overall performance. Another reason that I think it's very beneficial to start studying from day one is if there's ever like a day where you need to take a break and you need to not look at the material, you can do that without like jeopardizing your grade. Because I keep myself accountable from way early on to know the material, even if I take one day completely off, it doesn't have a horrible impact on my GPA, and it's very good for my mental health. Another tip I have is to develop good note-taking strategies. Now I realize that everyone learns differently. For me personally, I do learn very well from taking notes, but regardless of that, I think everyone should at least know how to take decent notes. I'm pretty sure it's scientifically proven that if you write information down, it helps your brain retain it better. A lot of time, content that you're tested on builds on previous content. So if you have an easy way to reference like a content from like a previous exam, if you've taken notes on it, if there's something that's a little bit fuzzy, you can always go back and know where to find it and reference it. And now suddenly this new content that like built on this old content makes a lot more sense because this foundation is a lot stronger. So even though you might not think like taking notes is your ultimate way of learning, I think having at least a sort of decent system of like jotting things down in a way that you can understand and reference can make a huge difference. As a slight side note, I highly recommend the app GoodNotes on your iPad. I can reference stuff from 2 years ago on my iPad if I need to, and I need it for like a future course. It's really great to have everything there. And so yeah, that's my little promo for GoodNotes. Tip number 7 is to do practice exams. For me personally, all my professors so far at Georgia Tech have provided practice exams for us to use, and I find them so freaking helpful. So I highly recommend when you take practice exams, take them in a very realistic setting. Keep yourself time, make sure you are sticking to the time limit you'll have on exam day, and make sure you take it in the same way you will take the exam, whether that's without notes or with like a crib sheet or something like that. If you experience this setting ahead of time several times, it can definitely help with like relieving test taking anxiety, which can overall help your performance. But additionally, it will help you realize what weaknesses you have and what time constraints you have. So if you realize that there's a specific type of problem that like maybe it's worth like 30-40 points and you're really struggling with it, you know what to focus on when you're taking that exam, because suddenly you've already done it, like you've already been exposed to this. I think a lot of times I hear that like the first exam is the learning curve for a class, because that first exam you're like getting used to that specific professor and that specific course's testing style. But if you've done the practice exams, you've already been exposed to that testing style, so that already sets you ahead of the entire class. And also taking a practice exam will help you realize what kind of problems you struggle with, what kind of things you might blank on during the exam, and it can help you focus your studying and narrowing it down a little bit more. If your professors do not provide you with practice exams, I recommend going through homeworks and supplementary problems and kind of using those as a practice exam and kind of taking them in the same manner without referencing your notes, just so you have some sort of exposure, even if it's not an exam, to that kind of like stressful setting. My final tip for you would be to have a healthy relationship with studying. That means take breaks, have rest days, don't burn yourself out, and never force yourself to study. I've had to experience the absolute horrible feeling of forcing myself to study and not retaining any of that information, and it's just not worth it. Once you realize this is something you're doing for your future to learn and to expand your knowledge, it makes all the more difference. Yes, maybe at the end of the day you are studying to get a good grade, but you are also studying to learn and to make yourself smarter. And I think looking at studying as like, I am doing something to make myself a more knowledgeable human being is a lot nicer than I am studying to get an A. And honestly, if you're burnt out, take a break. Your mental health matters so much more in the grand scheme of life than a number. I guess study responsibly, kids. Alright, well, with that said, that is basically all I had for this video. I do hope that you found it helpful, and if you did, make sure you give it a big old like, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!